counts elected officials for the United States, and he actually had the opportunity to meet with President Obama 4 times, and was invited to come watch an NBA game with him. So I did my research. And then locally, he's been with the Charlotte City Council for about 18 years, and he's been instrumental in getting the funding for some of the upgrades that were done for the Charlotte Panthers Stadium, as well as the relocation of the BB&T minor league baseball team as well as he was instrumental in the rezoning, the construction of the North Lake Mall. Outside of that, he does a lot of volunteer work. I mean, when you look at his biography, it's just line after line of just volunteer work after volunteer work after volunteer work. And if I were to sit here and read up all the stuff that he's done, it'll take a while. So without any further ado, please help me welcome Councilman James Mitchell.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure on 2 fronts. Number one, to be in your great city of Gastonia, and second, I get to embarrass my wife before she comes up to speak to you, and I don't get this opportunity a lot. Before I go any further, I'd like to recognize a council member who's here, and he had the opportunity. We were supposed to speak at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church last Sunday, and Councilman Gallagher came up to me and said, "Boy, we need you to come back," so we will. Your council member here in the great city of Gastonia. So this young lady I get to introduce, I have to get the height right that she gets on me. I say she's only 5'3". She would say I'm 5'3.5". So she's 5'3.5". We got married about 5 years ago. And the first thing that really stood out to Joan Higginbotham was just her humbleness. I would tell you, we met on the dance floor in Washington, D.C. So men, you can truly dance into someone's life. That's exactly what I did. But what struck me, she didn't talk about her accomplishments. She didn't talk about how many days she'd been in space. She really talked about making a difference in society. And so during this time, last month was Black History Month. So my wife was all over the place: Chicago, MIT, 4 or 5 minutes in Charlotte. And then when Mr. White called us back here in December and said, "I would love for her to come and speak to our youth." And we were very excited. She kept putting it on the calendar. She said, "Honey, remember, we need to be in Gastonia on Saturday." And I looked at the schedule. I said, "Oh, that is CIAA week in Charlotte." She said, "But we still need to be in Gastonia." So we have been entertaining folks at CIAA, and we're glad to be here. So let me say a couple of things before the star comes up here and really inspire our youth. One thing my wife would tell you is never give up on your dreams. She has failed in her first attempt, but then came right back, studied hard to make sure she can become an astronaut. And so for all the youth out there, people tell you what you cannot do. There's no limit on your abilities. Don't put any limit on your dreams. And like my wife, stay true to your passion. And so now we're raising 2 teenage daughters. One is already in North Carolina A&T, a junior. We have another, the youngest one is at home about to go to college. And she is so excited because she said, "Great, now we can be empty nesters as the kids grow up." But one thing she tells our children, that is, believe in yourself, do your very best, and always be respectful. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce my wife, former astronaut Joan Higginbotham.
F-16s and F-18s flying, I got a sense, I was like, man, I wish I was back in the cockpit, because flying is like the coolest thing.
All right, you guys can hear me? I'm going to turn it down just a little. So that was a really inspirational video for me. I just want to tell you a couple of things before I show you my video. So this is before like a lot of you all were born. In 1987, I graduated from college with an electrical engineering degree. And it was interesting because when I was in high school, or before I got to high school, I loved math and science. How many of you kids love math and science? Raise your hand, come on, be proud of that. Oh, amen, all right. So I loved math and science, and I was really good at it, and it came easily to me, but I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And luckily, I was introduced to this program named Inroad. So it was the precursor, or the program before your STEM programs now, your science, technology, engineering, and math programs. And through that program, like you all are going through this program now, I got exposed to what engineers do. Now you guys are doing some really cool stuff in the video. You went whitewater rafting, you launch rockets, you do all this stuff. We would just go to the people's office buildings to see what they do. So you're doing way more cooler stuff than we got to do. But through that, I got to understand what engineers do, and I thought, I can do that. That's what I can do with my love of math and science. I can become an engineer. So I became an electrical engineer, and when I was in college, I actually worked for IBM. So IBM, when I was younger, was like Google and Apple today. It was like the computer place, right? And I worked for them for 2 summers. I was like, hey, after college, I'm gonna go work for IBM because they're a great company, and they thought I was a really great employee. But they weren't hiring engineers, right? They said, come over and do sales. I was like, yeah, I don't want to sell anything to anybody. Because if I had to do that for a living, I wouldn't eat. But in the meantime, NASA, who had just had like this very horrific accident in the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger, 2 minutes into flight, actually exploded, and they lost the entire crew and the vehicle. That happened, but NASA was ready to start flying shuttles again. And he said, well, why don't you come down and work on the shuttle? And I'm thinking, okay, you just had a major accident. I live in Chicago. I have to move 1,000 miles away from family or friends. I don't know if that's a good career move. But luckily, they flew me to Florida. I got to see the space shuttle. So I went into the garage that they call the orbital processing facility, and they had the space shuttle in basically just open. The doors were open, and all the wiring and like the guts were just spilling out. I was like, that is so cool. And the first thing I thought about after seeing all that wiring, it has over 200 miles of wiring. The first thing I thought is, why doesn't this explode more often? And I didn't mean that in a terrible way. I meant it because it was so complicated inside. And I saw that, and then I took me out to the launch pad. It looked like something out of Star Wars. I was like, oh, I'm so there. So I figured I'd work for NASA for 5 years, and I'd go back to private industry. And about 6 months after I got there, they launched the shuttle. And I was 3.5 miles from the launch pad, which is basically where my office was, a beautiful government trailer. So I went outside of my office, they were counting down, and this vehicle went off, and I almost teared. It cried. It was the most impressive thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I was like, I'm gonna do this. So long story short, I did that for 9 years, was doing really well, loved what I was doing, and this guy told me, he said, you know what? He said, 5 words that would change my life forever. He said, you'd make a great astronaut. You make a great astronaut. And I was like, okay, thank you. And I didn't really think much about it because astronauts were these guys who came when I was getting the shuttle ready for them, and they came in these really cool blue suits, and they seemed like they were 10 feet tall, and they were strong and big and smart, and theoretically everything that I thought I was not, right? And so about a month after this man made this very nice comment to me, he says, have you put in your application to be an astronaut? And I said, no. And he asked me about 2 weeks later. I was like, okay, I'm going to put in my application to be an astronaut. And I did that, and guess what? 6,000 other people did the same thing. 6,000 people, right? And that number is a very large number, but let me tell you how large that number is. So that year, 6,000 people applied, but they only interviewed 122. So talking about doing the math earlier, I don't know where many is, doing the math, so that 6,000 number got this much bigger. Basically 0.02% of the people who applied got to do an interview. So we did an interview, they did a whole lot of medical tests, a whole lot of psychological tests, and then the FBI investigated us to make sure that we were good citizens, right? So about 6 months later, they went through everything, they were ready to make their selection, and I got a phone call, and the gentleman began with, Joan, we had so many good candidates, which meant I didn't get selected. And then I was upset. I was like, what do you mean I can't be an astronaut? How dare you? I don't like people telling me that I can't do something. So I said, okay, you had 6,000 people. I was one of the 122 that got an interview, so I had something, but I wasn't one of the 15 that was selected, so what am I missing? And he said, your master's degree is not technical enough. Not something I wanted to hear because I just finished that master's degree. So I said, okay, let's suck this up. Let's go back to school, got another master's degree, more technical, and got selected the next time around. So as my husband was saying, what the gentleman in the video was saying is, don't let things get you down. I was bummed after I did not get selected to be an astronaut. And one of my colleagues did, by the way, so I had to go to work and be happy for her, right? So, you know, sometimes in life you gotta pick yourself up and dust yourself off and try it again. One guy in my class tried 10 times before he actually got selected. So that's stamina and that's perseverance, and that's what you're going to need in life. I always tell people that, first of all, I want you to aim high, and I want you to dream big. And thirdly, I want you to persevere, because without perseverance, things won't happen. Had I decided just to let it go and not try to get another master's degree, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today about to show you what 13 days in space looks like. So you guys ready for that? All right, let's roll it. So this is like the highlight reel, 13 days in space in 13 minutes. So we took all the best stuff that we had and we put it into a video. So on December 7th, we actually, 2006, we all got out, we got on our orange launch suits, we headed out. This is our patch. You see it has an American flag. It also has a Swedish flag because we had a Swede on board with us. So this is actually 2 days later. We did this on December 7th. We went out, we got to the launch pad, we got strapped in, we laid on our backs for 3 hours, and when they said T-minus 9 minutes and counting, they're like, yeah, you're not gonna go today because the weather isn't good. So 2 days later, we got out. The weather wasn't appreciably different, and I thought that we were just gonna be doing a dress rehearsal. So this is the downstairs. This is Sunny. We're taking her up to the International Space Station. I sat next to her, and then Christer, the Swedish astronaut, sat next to me. And so we laid on our backs for 3 hours. They went through all the checks. Everything was looking good. When they said T-minus 0, we actually looked it out. And this is where I need you to blast the video. So you'll notice up here that we have a camera. You see how shaky it is? That was right at liftoff. So it kind of felt like somebody did like this to us and kicked us off the launch pad. And then you have 7 million pounds of thrust. So you're just being hurled into space, right? At about 8 seconds into the launch here, you'll see that and I'm going to let this play for about 30 seconds and I'm going to take you on. So you can see it's really kind of shaky. So about 2.5 minutes, you see these are the boosters. Those are the white boosters on either side of the shuttle. At 2.5 minutes, we used up all the fuel, so they actually were jettisoned away. There are actually cones. Under the cones, there are parachutes. Parachutes come out and we get those. You see the light that just went there? That was the second controlled explosion. So the shuttle is up here. The tank is now floating away. I'm going to point out that little piece of debris that was floating around there. So now we're up in orbit. That took all of 8.5 minutes, and we're up in space traveling 17,500 miles per hour. Now you saw that little piece of debris that floated out. So this is a robotic arm, and on the end is a camera. And the purpose of this is we take that arm and we pan up every single solid tile that we have to make sure we haven't taken any damage. And if you look really closely right there, you see me waving to the crew. So the one thing that we can't do with that arm, because it's only limited, it has about 60 feet, is that we can't see the bottom of the shuttle. So as we approach the space station, the shuttle does a backflip. And of course this is sped up. It takes about 45 minutes for the entire maneuver to complete. So as the bottom of the orbiter is actually up towards station, Our astronauts on the space station actually take footage of the video of the bottom of the shuttle to make sure that we haven't taken any damage to that tile. So now we're about to rendezvous, meet up with the International Space Station. So this is a space station window. You can see the shuttle. What's happening is the space station is moving here, we're moving with this, we're going in orbit together. We get up in front of the space station and then we start backing into it. So we go from 17,500 miles per hour to an inch per second. So we slow down. You can tell we're in space because my ponytail is floating. And then you can see the space station coming in right over my shoulder. And once the two vehicles mate, there are actually latches that hook on either side, and they pull the vehicles together. So once they're together, we open the hatch on the side of the space station and on the shuttle, and you can freely flow between both of the vehicles now. So on the space shuttle, we had 7 people. On the space station, they had 3 people. So now we're a crew of 7. It's a crew of 10, I'm sorry, that wasn't good math. 7 plus 3 is 10. So let me just kind of orient you on the vehicle. So we're back on the shuttle. This is the mid-deck where you just saw, where we were up there. You're going downstairs now. So there's the aft-flight deck to the mid-deck. This is our potty, as we affectionately call it. And you see the loops on the floors because sometimes you just don't want to float. So that's how you anchor yourself. So now as we continue to go back, this is the hatch that we opened to get to the space station. And we're going to keep going back in the space shuttle. So this is like the trunk of your car. This is our space payload bay where we keep all our equipment. So we took up 2,000 pounds of equipment to the space station. You can tell it's morning because you see someone has their sleeping bag still deployed, but you can really tell it's morning, because I'm talking to my crewmate. I'm like, Krister, I haven't combed my hair, I don't have my contacts in, I don't have makeup on, don't put this video out anywhere. And it makes the final reel, right? So if we were to go back to the space shuttle and make a left turn, that takes you to the International Space Station. Now the space station is composed of places that the US built and places that the Russians built. So this is the US laboratory. That's where we do all of our different experiments. You see Mike here, he looks like he's upside down, but in space you can just move left, right, up, and down, however you need to be. And if you take a quick left, this is the airlock. That's where the astronauts go in before they do their spacewalk and they put on their suits. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But as we continue to go back, you see we have a speed limit 17,000 miles per hour. We're going through what they call a node. So it's a connector between the US lab and then the Russian segment. So now we're entering into the Russian segment. This is called the fixed service base. It's where they keep their food. It's where they put their workout clothes, so you kind of fly through that pretty quickly because it's a little smelly in there. And then you go to the very final module, and this is called the service module. So this is where the kitchen, the bathroom, and the sleeping quarters are for the Russian crew. So we went up there to actually accomplish something. We were helping to build the International Space Station. And so we took up another piece of the space station called a truss. It looks like a piece of a bridge, and that's what you're looking at here. And so my crew members on the shuttle side picked it up, and they actually put it on the left-hand side of the shuttle. And then Sunny and I went in with the space station arm, and we grabbed it from them. So in a second here, you're going to see the truss. That's the shuttle arm, and the one above it was the space station arm. Okay. So as Sunny and I are going to move that piece of the hardware into place, we actually have 2 of the astronauts that are about to get ready to go into outside so they can actually bolt it together. Now this is kind of like diving. When you dive, you kind of breathe oxygen and you don't want to get the bends. You don't want nitrogen coming up. So they actually have to go in and do a pre-breathe, pure oxygen, so they can get their systems ready before they go out in space. So Sunny and I are using the robotic arm to take up the truss. You can see us down here. We're going to put it over here. And you can see our astronauts out there. Obviously this is sped up because they're looking like little ants. But they're getting ready for us to do our maneuvers. So Sunny and I are inside. We don't have any windows whatsoever. So we're actually using kind of like a video game. We have cameras that are stationed all throughout the space station. And we use the cameras to guide us as we're inside. So we're bringing the truss into place here. And then you can see the 2 astronauts out here that are getting ready to actually physically bolt it in place so that it'll be there permanently. Now what you're about to see is a really cool shot. So you see the shuttle, and you see this tether here. You see how far away they are from the shuttle. The reason they don't flow away is because of that tether. So they have one tether on either side. In case one breaks, they still have a second tether. Even if that one breaks, they actually have a jetpack where they can kind of fly themselves to the shuttle should they get away. Now, the other thing that we needed to do is that we need to actually do an electrical reconfiguration. So I say it's like this. When you're at home and you have a power strip and you have all these things plugged into the power strip, what we did is we took them out the power strip and we actually plugged them into the wall. So we put them into the final power station that they were going to use. But you see the connectors are really big because we have 160 volts running through those things. And Billy is kind of leading the guys outside, telling them what to do and what's going to be the next task. So normally the astronauts just take it and they walk along the truss, however they need to go. But you see here, I actually have one of my crewmates on the end here, and he's moving a very large piece of equipment. So that day, I was actually flying him around the space station. Now, one of the last things that we had to do is we had to take this big solar array, and we had to fold it back up into the blanket box. And I always say it's kind of like a AAA map, but a lot of people don't know what AAA maps are anymore. So you know how they never fold it up correctly? Well, this is what's happening to our solar array, and that's not good when it happens to a solar array. And so what the ground told us to do, they sent Beamer out there and said, hey, go shake it. And they told him to shake it at 44 inch-pounds per either array. And we're like, how does he measure that as he's shaking it? So he would just shake it and it would come in. Didn't work quite that well. So what they ended up doing is they took that wrench, which is a wrench, metal, and he was fanning it. That was 160 volts. So we were telling him to be very careful about where he touched that array. And after 3 spacewalks and about 3 hours later, they finally got that into the blanket box. And Mission Control was very excited about that because that meant that we weren't going to delay the next mission. So we worked really hard for the first 7 days, and then we had to do a little bit of exercising because that keeps your legs from getting too weak. And then we had a little bit of fun. We had Krister and Bill here who were actually playing with frisbees. And then when they got tired playing with frisbees, they played with their crewmates. So this is not something I would have done on the first 4 days because your head is still very stuffy and I probably would have gotten incredibly sick. We also got to play with our food a little bit. And because you're falling around the Earth, any liquid that escapes will turn into a bubble and it'll stay there until it hits something or until you eat it, whatever happens first. But normally the way we ate was like we eat here. We had our all packaged food. The one interesting thing is our food is made really sticky so that when we open the package it doesn't float away. Right? So this is day number 9. We're about to undock and we just had a meal as a crew. So everybody went over to the space station side. Everyone brought out their really neat stuff that they brought up with them. All the different little delicacies. We had some Russian delicacies. We had some French delicacies. And we did our last mission photo op and our conference call down to the ground, and then we closed the hatches on each side and we undocked. So we have the space station backing away. You have to be really careful because if you don't back away at a constant rate, you'll actually start to bump into each other again. So you see me there with the laser gun, and it's just measuring the rate at which we're backing away, making sure that it is at a good constant rate so that we keep moving aft and away from the space station. And then you can see this is where that other solar wave was that we actually put into the blanket box. So now it's time to come home. The last thing we have to do is close the door. You'll see a jet fire here. Now we still have 3 engines, but we used up all the fuel going up. So the only way we move around is that small jets that we fire to move us back and forth and up and down. Now, as we come back here, we put back on our own orange suits. I'm like giving us a thumbs up. Mission Control said that we're ready to come on home. And it's kind of like a video game now. So you see the little diamond here. The pilot basically has to keep that diamond in the square. Now, you remember we have 3 engines, we have no fuel. So as we come home, we're basically a big rock falling back down to the Earth. We're not under power flight. We're just falling back to the Earth. So to help us slow down, we do a series of S-curves. We'll do this. It'll help dissipate some of our speed. And then as we come in about 7 times steeper than an airliner. So as we come into the runway here, we're coming in just like this. And you'll see at the end that he will pull the nose up here in just 1 second. You'll see it raise up really quickly. That's when we start to pull the nose up so that we come into a less steeper dive. And what that does is the air hits the bottom of the shuttle and it helps us slow down again. So we come down, we land about 2,000 feet down the runway. And there's one more maneuver that helps to slow us down because we're still moving at a pretty good clip. I think as you saw, they were moving about 300 knots. So there is a drag chute or a parachute that'll come out the back. And I always say it kind of looks like a Budweiser can, the red, white, and blue. And once that has slowed us down and the nose gear has touched, we cut that loose so that it doesn't get caught up in the engine. And after almost 13 days in space, I think we went about 5.3 million miles, we landed at the Kennedy Space Center on December 22nd, 2006, just in time for Santa to bring us some really great presents. But we really thought that this was the best present that we have at Christmas. You can stop it. And so I want to tell the students who are here today, I would just encourage you to try different things. I think you're at a really good point in your life because you're getting exposure to some really wonderful things I've never been exposed to when I was your age. So take advantage of that. The other thing I would say is that you have some really good role models and mentors in Mr. White and all his staff, and they want you to do well. So make sure that you listen to them. Make sure you take advantage of the opportunities that they're bringing to you because you never know where you're going to go in life. I never wanted to be an astronaut. I just wanted to work for IBM. But the thing was, I had this opportunity presented to me, and I was ready to take advantage of it because of the training that I got in my education. So let's see, who are the students who are here that work with Mr. White? Can you stand up? I know it's Saturday morning, it's rough. All right, so I want you guys to take a promise. Can you guys, you wanna do that for me? Make a promise to me? Make a promise to yourself? All right, I want everybody to raise their right hand. All right, say, I promise to aim high. I promise to dream big. And I promise to know that the sky is no longer the limit. Awesome, you may be seated. And the reason I say that the sky is no longer the limit is because when I was growing up, people would tell us that the sky is the limit, and that means you can go really, really high, right? But I say the sky is no longer the limit because I've literally been above and beyond the sky. So I know that there's something above the sky. So that's why I tell you that the sky is no longer the limit. So I want you all to figure out what your sky is and know that not only can you achieve it, but you can absolutely go above it. So that's what I want you all to take home with you today. Agreed? All right. So the parents, how many other parents are here? Guardians? All right. So you all don't get off easy, all right? So I want you all to say to the kids that you will support them in any way you can. People always ask me who my role models are, and they expect me to say it was some astronaut or somebody else. My role models were my parents. Why? Because I saw them every single day. Were they astronauts? No. My mom was a registered nurse and a school teacher, and my dad was a dental technologist. But they were my role models because they're the ones who expected me to do well in school and wouldn't let me do anything less than my best. They were the ones who gave me good moral character, and they were the ones that told me I better work hard because when I graduated from college, they weren't supplying me with money anymore. So they gave me the foundation that I needed to become a success. So parents, you are your child's greatest role model. Know that they are looking at you every day, even if they're rolling their eyes. Trust me, I have 2 teenagers, I know. But they are looking at you every day, and they are looking to you for guidance. And what they see is what they will emulate. So be the best role models you can for your children. So with that, so thank you parents, because I know it's a hard job. I have 2 teenager girls, 17, 20. It's a hard job. I understand that. But you can do whatever you want to do for your kids, and you're the best role model that they have. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to take a sip of water, and I'm waiting for my first question. And I always love the first person who raises their hand because everybody's looking at everybody else trying to see who's going to raise their hand first. Oh, this gentleman up here.
I'm curious to know how microgravity, that 13 days in space, affected you, or if it affected you at all emotionally, and that's one question. And the second question, did it affect your menstrual cycle or throw it off, or how did NASA account for that?
That's it. I've never had that question before. All right. So emotionally, so I'm going to kind of answer that two ways, physical and emotionally. So emotionally, yes. There were two probably most poignant moments for me. So we travel 17,500 miles per hour. We go around the world one time every 90 minutes, right? So we get to see 45 minutes of day and 45 minutes of darkness. So we see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every single day. And the first time I saw that sun come up over, we were flying, we fly different attitudes. Sometimes we fly like a plane, like this. And when we're flying this way, we got to see about an eighth of the curvature of the Earth. Sometimes we fly upside down and backwards, and when we do that, we're flying over the Earth like when you're in an airplane, that's the view. So when I saw the sun come up over the Earth, I could actually see the atmosphere, and it looked like it was 2 millimeters thick. And the first thing that came into my mind was that is the only thing that's saving us from extinction. So I said the world is very fragile, and we need to take care of it. So that was the first poignant moment for me. The second one, from an emotional standpoint, is we were going over the Middle East, and I actually saw some smoke rising up, and I thought immediately that that was some type of discord or unrest or some bombing or something. And in the space shuttle, there were 2 African American astronauts. There was an astronaut who was of Russian and Korean descent. We had one astronaut who was from London who became an American citizen so he could become an astronaut. We had another astronaut whose parents hailed from India, and we had the Scandinavian astronaut who was from, his mom was from Sweden, dad from Norway. On the space station, we had a Russian cosmonaut, we had a German astronaut, and we had an astronaut who was Spanish American. So we had like our own mini United Nations in a tin can orbiting for 8 days together. We spoke 5 different languages, and we had all these different multicultural things going on. And I looked outside, and I saw the smoke billowing up, and I literally turned around and looked inside, and I said, if all of us, with all of the different cultures and languages, can get along to accomplish a mission, a goal, why can't we all get along on Earth? There's so much space. If you don't like this person, he doesn't like you, you can go this way, he goes this way. So it's like, why can't we all get along? So that was the second emotional thing. As far as weightlessness and physical, so if you're menstruating in a woman and your cycle's coming on, you take things and deal with it. It's no different than being in Earth. It did not, no. And luckily nothing happened, so yeah, that would have been a pain. So good question, sorry. Yes, who has the mic?
How scared were you when you were launching?
How scared was I when I was launching? You know, I wasn't scared, and let me tell you why. First of all, I believe in God, and I believe when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. So I've had more scary moments on I-77 than I ever did on that shuttle. So, and that's the truth. The other thing is that originally my mission was scheduled for 2003, and in 2003 we had another accident. Just 16 minutes from home, the entire shuttle crew of Columbia was lost along with the vehicle. That means they perished. And 3 of my classmates were on board, 3 people that I started the program with. And it was just a horrendous day for me. But I knew that there wasn't going to be another accident anytime too soon. So even though that delayed our mission 3 years, we didn't fly to 2006, I still felt very safe. The other reason I felt safe is that I used to work on the shuttle. So before I became an astronaut, I was a rocket scientist, and I worked on this. And I knew a lot of the people that worked on the shuttle, and I knew they were very competent engineers, and their goal was to give us a really good vehicle that was going to fly safely. So with all that going for me, I was good. That being said, I did have my will in order, so I'm not stupid. So,
Did you reuse water?
do you reuse water? That's a really good question. So we actually made our own water on the shuttle. So there's some tanks that are, I don't want to take the tape off. There's some tanks, so hydrogen and oxygen tanks that run on either side of the shuttle. And you have hydrogen and oxygen, so you can H2O, right? So we had these fuel cells that would produce electricity, and the byproduct was water. So we would make our own water, and we would put them in tanks. So to answer your question, sometimes if we did not use all the water in the tanks, we'd actually spew them overboard out into space because we didn't want the tanks overflowing. So we really didn't reuse the water that we made. That's a good question. I never had that before.
About how many gallons of fuel do you use for one rocket?
How many gallons of fuel? All right, so in the white boosters, it's actually solid fuel, right? And I don't know exactly how much that weighs. It's monomethyl hydrazine that we use. Now, in the shuttle, so these engines here actually use a liquid fuel. So in the orange tank that sits here, there is an liquid oxygen here, a tank, and then there's a longer liquid hydrogen tank. It feeds into the shuttle and it combusts out, and that's how we get our fuel. And there are probably, I'm guessing here, and I'm gonna have to look it up after you ask me now, because I'm not really sure. Probably, I think there were roughly 200,000 gallons of the hydrogen and about 100 or so thousand gallons of the liquid oxygen, so.
Mentioned in the beginning that you used to fly planes.
Yes.
How did that help with, I guess, going to space and your mission in space?
So we have these jets that we call the T-38. It was a two-seater, somebody in front, somebody in back. And besides getting us between California and Houston and Florida, you got to practice crew resource management, because the one thing about the shuttle is that it's all about the team. I could not have individually done anything. Every time you do something, it's you and somebody else, especially when it's something that's critical. And so as we would fly our jets, we would practice crew resource management, basically how to operate as a team. And it's interesting because one of my classmates and I were flying to New Orleans one day. So, no, we were flying to Florida. And we got up and I'm in the back seat and I'm flying and I'm starting to feel a little dizzy. And I said, Billy, I'm feeling a little dizzy. I said, how are you feeling? He's like, good. So I looked down and I looked to make sure my oxygen blinker was blinking, and it wasn't blinking, which meant I wasn't getting a lot of oxygen. I said, is your blinker working? He says, yes. So that meant something was wrong with mine. So I said, okay, I'm starting to get hypoxic. I'm starting to get lightheaded. I said, we need to descend down to 18,000 feet, back where the atmosphere is, where you can breathe. So we did that. We called Tower, the controller, air traffic controller. We declared an emergency, and we were close enough that we could actually go back home to Texas. So we turned around, stayed low, went back home. And so him being in the front seat and us training about that for that scenario helped me diagnose what was going on. So we landed. The equipment guys took my helmet, which kind of looked like that. They looked at my hose, and there was just like a pinhole hose in my hole in my hose, and that's what was causing me not to get plenty of oxygen. So the jet was another resource that we used to train us how to work in tandem as a crew.
What was it like to be in space? Was it exciting or was it kind of scary?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
What was it like to be in space? Was it scary or was it like fun to be out in the spaceship?
So it was fun. So when, after the 8.5 minutes were over, we were in space, we were weightless. we took off our seatbelts and basically floated to the top of the shuttle ceiling. We were just kind of giggling like schoolgirls because it was really cool, right? And then we had to get to work. And so we worked for like 7 or 8 days straight without having any time off. So it was, while it was fun, it was business because we had things to get done. And then after that 7th day, I had some downtime, and that's when I went and put my nose against the window and just watched the world fly underneath me and just looked at how beautiful it was. So I was never scared. It was always fun. It was really busy. And then there were some good times where we just got to hang out and be a crew and enjoy the fact that we were 200 miles above the surface of the earth.
Okay, I have a question. I know you said that someone inspired you to become an astronaut when they said that you would make a great astronaut. My question is that when they said it, did that spark an interest in you where you started thinking, I could become a great astronaut, or what kind of like,
I took it as a compliment and nothing more. Nothing as in an action of you need to pursue this. And the thing was, I was really happy being a rocket scientist. So every day, I would go to work and walk on the shuttle and do stuff on the shuttle. So that was really cool. And so, to me, that was the whole thing. But I didn't see in myself the ability to have all the necessary tools to become an astronaut. So luckily, this person saw something in me that I did not see in myself, and thank God for that. And thank God he kind of pushed me along to go ahead and do this. Otherwise, I would not have had this opportunity, this really unique opportunity and a way to serve my country. And this lady up here had her hand up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You mentioned that you had a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
What was your initial master's degree?
So my initial master's degree was in engineering management. They wanted it to be a little bit more technical. So it was a little engineering, a little management, but they wanted a more technical degree. My second one, my husband's like, what's your second one? So my second degree was in space systems.
You said that you performed experiments in space. What experiments did you perform?
So for us, it was strictly a space station build mission, but for the astronauts that were actually resident on space station for 4 months or more, they would do things as far as growing plants and things, how gravity acted on plants. There were some animal experiments that they did. They grow cultures, basically protein crystals that they used to make different medicines. And the more perfect the crystal was, the more pure the medicine was. So there's a slew of experiments that they did on board.
How long were you engineering before you became an astronaut?
So I worked at the Kennedy Space Center on shuttles for 9 years before I became an astronaut, doing various and sundry things, but all the time still working on the shuttle and launching shuttles into space. My total career with NASA was 20 years.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I know you guys go through a lot of trainings and a lot of things to prepare to go into space. Is there anything when you were actually there that surprised you or made you go, wow, I didn't expect this?
Anything while I was in space?
Yes.
Well, you know what? We go through so much training that anytime something went wrong with the system on the shuttle or something went wrong, like the solar array, we were well versed on how to handle that. The biggest thing that was surprising is like getting up and putting in my contact lenses. So, you get up in the morning, you take the cap off the toothpaste, you set it down. You can't do that in space. And because we didn't have running water, you kind of had to plan out how you did things. So when I get up, I brush my teeth, spit the toothpaste into the sink, I wash my face, and I put in my contact lenses. Can't do that in space because you only have one washcloth in the morning and one in the evening. So what I had to do is I would get up, I would wash my face, I put in my contact lenses, and then I brush my teeth and I'd spit out my toothpaste into my washcloth because there's no sink, right? Some of the astronauts would actually swallow the toothpaste, which just grosses me out to no end. So they didn't care which order they did things, but I had to do things in that order. And to me, the hardest things were the things that we take for granted here on Earth, like going to the restroom, that's a process. And doing hygiene, it's those type of things that you can't practice here on Earth that were the things that kind of ate your lunch in terms of time when you were up in space. Oh God.
You talk about the process. Can you explain how did you use the bathroom?
Thank you, baby.
Number 1 and number 2.
All right. So in the video, there was that little fan on the top. That was our we call it the potty. And if you've ever been to a fair and you've been to a porta potty, it's very similar. Except there are a whole bunch of switches on the wall, and there's a checklist that you go through. So you go into the potty and you seat yourself. If you're doing a number 1, you can actually stand, even the women. So everyone has a funnel that is connected to a hose, and you urinate to the funnel, and it goes into a container. So there are 2 different types of container. If you need to do a number 2, you sit down, and the first thing you do is there's some little bars, and once you sit down, you put the bars over your thighs, and that helps you keep seated, which is very important. And then you do what you need to do, and then you hit all the switches, and it takes that waste and it basically sends it into a centrifuge, so it slings things around. The solids and the liquids during that centrifugal process, because they're different weights, will separate, and the liquids go into one tank, the solids go into another tank. So this is what he's dying for me to tell you. So the tanks are only so big. You have 7 people, you're there 12 days, so the tanks are gonna get full. So if you've ever watched a space shuttle mission, they say, okay, Discovery, this is mission control, we're ready for you to do a wastewater quantity adjust. That means that they're going to take the liquid in the tank and they're going to spew it out into space. So all the urine gets spewed out into space, and all the solids actually come home with us, and they actually analyze it to see what type of minerals and vitamins and all that kind of stuff that we have excreted and lost during our space flight. Thank you for that, Logan.
Do they still study you? Does NASA still study you for the rest of your life?
That's a very good question. So when I got selected to be an astronaut, they found somebody in the population that mirrored me. So basically somebody of my height, my weight, my age, my same type of things that happen with me, right? And so they have that person as my mirror. And every year I go back to NASA and they do a physical. So they have all the data they have data on me from probably the last 12, 13 years. And they compare my data from my annual physical with this person who gets an annual physical every year. And they try to see trends that happen in astronauts that have been up in space and have been exposed to extra radiation that the normal population doesn't. So yes, I mean, as long as I go back every year, they'll give me a physical, and they will see if there are things that are going wrong with me that is not going wrong in my mirror. So.
Why can't you use like all the waste to make fuel?
That's a good question. You probably can, but on the space shuttle, there wasn't enough room. So the whole space shuttle itself had a whole bunch of stuff in here, and there probably wasn't a lot of equipment to put in there where you could take that waste and try to turn it into fuel. But on the space station, they actually take the urine now, they treat it, and they use it for water. So it's now drinkable water. That's a very good question. That's why I won't say on space station, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. But this question I had, you spoke about radiation, and as far as I know, you're outside of the Earth's atmosphere. Just how much dose difference did you see while you were in orbit versus being on Earth?
So I actually don't know what the dose difference is, but every astronaut wears a dosimeter, which measures the amount of radiation that you receive, right? And I know one night there was like gonna be some solar flare activity, so they told us to actually sleep in a particular section of the space station that's heavily shielded so that we wouldn't get that extra dose. I don't know how much extra I've seen than anybody else, but every astronaut has a cutoff point where they're like, you can't fly anymore because you've received X amount. I didn't get anywhere near that, so it's a good question. And when you're done, the little lady right there has had her hand up for a while.
Does the food space taste the same as it would on Earth?
That's a good question. Actually, the food in space tastes a little different. So there are a couple of things that happen. You actually grow a little bit because gravity's not acting on your spine. So I grew about a ½ an inch, and your taste buds change. And so we have a class where we go through all of the different food choices, and we can pick our menu. So I got some beef enchiladas, which are really good, but when I got up on orbit and I was in space, they were like really, really, really spicy. I had some yogurt that I really liked on the ground that was just nasty. So we trade food and stuff when we got up there because your taste buds do change.
How old are you supposed to be when you go to outer space?
How old are you supposed to be when you go to outer space? Well, we've had somebody as young as in their 30s, that's probably not young to you, someone as young as 30s going to the space. And then we had a gentleman who was, I think at the time it was Senator John Glenn, I think he was like 70. So there was a wide range, but I'd have to say the average age is probably around 39 to 42 in that range.
So, you know how, like, if you turn upside down on Earth, you get, like, a blood rush. Do you get blood rush in space?
You don't necessarily get a blood rush, but as we're sitting on the shuttle ready to launch, because the shuttle launches like this, so we don't sit like you're sitting there. If you were to tilt yourself on your back, that's how we are. So we're doing that for 3 hours. During that 3 hours, we start to see a shift in the fluids. Now, you probably didn't notice when I was showing the video, but as soon as you get up on orbit, all the fluids just shift to your head. And I call it the Charlie Brown head because your head gets big. So I had like a little pimple on my forehead, and then when I got to space, it was like gargantuan. Yeah, it's really attractive. And so that starts to happen. I rambled on, forgot your question. What was your question? Yes, you don't get a blood rush, but what they tell you to do is because you have all that fluid in your head and you're kind of stuffy, they say for the first 2 or 3 days that you need to keep your head aligned with your body so that you don't get motion sick, okay? So if you notice in the video, there was actually a round tunnel to take us from the shuttle to the payload bay. So I had to actually put a fire extinguisher in there, and it was hard to do, and I was turning all around, and I got it on secured, and then I floated back out to the mid deck. Well, when I floated out, I said, those lockers are supposed to be over here, but they're here. So I had turned myself around. Almost immediately, I just got sick. So that was not pleasant. So for the next couple of days, I tried to keep everything just straight, and that really helped with me not getting motion sickness. So you don't get a rush per se, but if you don't stay kind of straight and vertical until you're used to space, you'll get motion sick. No, there's a young man behind you that has a question.
I don't know how to really say this, but how do you, if you have to grow up in space, how do you do it?
If you grow up in space, how do you?
Grow up.
Oh, grow up. I'm an expert on that, let me tell you. All right, so we have sick bags that, I had one in every pocket. Excuse me. And so when I got sick, I could immediately pull out the bag. So it kind of looks like a sandwich bag, but it has a diaper on the end. So the thought is you get sick in the bag and you take the cloth diaper and wipe your mouth, and then you throw everything away. What they didn't tell you is that you're in space. And so as you're getting sick into the bag, it's not going down into the bag. And so I'm giving a whole bunch. I'm just my whole last dinner came up. And I have the bag around my mouth, and it's actually kind of seeping up my face and out of the bag. And actually it kind of got in my eye a little bit. I had to get my contact lens out and throw it. And yeah, so that's the one malfunction with the bag. They didn't think about gravity and things don't go to the bottom of the bag, and you have a lot, that's what's gonna happen. So I got sick, I wiped my face, I threw everything away, took out my contact lens, and I actually got a shot from my commander, gave me a shot, and it helped with my sickness, and I didn't get sick anymore after that. But that's how you throw up in space. All the things you wanted to know and more.
Two questions.
Yes.
One, find out about G-force when you're going up.
Yes.
How many G-forces? And two, the other one is men when they shave. Do they shave, or is it possible to shave in space?
It is.
And, you know, stubbles and.
Yeah. And so as we're going in, we feel the most G-forces is about 3.5 Gs, about 6 minutes into flight, and they call it chest in because they're coming in like this, and it feels like an elephant is sitting in your chest. And breathing out is very laborious. You have to really exhale, right? That's the greatest amount of Gs. You only experience it for about 25 seconds or so, and then you're weightless and it's all good. As far as shaving, yes, the men did shave. And so the shaving cream stayed on very nicely, but as they shaved, they had to just do one stroke, and then they'd have to wipe it off. And if for some reason some shaving cream got away, they'd have to go catch it. So yeah, it is possible to shave in space. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I have two questions, totally unrelated. Are there any clean factory automation opportunities in space?
Clean factory?
Yeah, like manufacturing in a dust-free environment, or would space dust interfere with that? And
Well, inside we actually had filters that filtered out the air because you can only have so many particles. If you're talking from an external standpoint, I'm sure if you're doing some type of manufacturing something, you'd have to have a clean room to make sure the dust of wherever you're on the moon or whatever wouldn't get into your facilities.
and my second question was, what was used for containment if like the shaving cream got away, or if the vomit got away?
The containment was you go find it and get it. There was no containment. So, yeah, I won't tell you that story, it's a little too gross. But yeah, if something floated away, you basically had to go get it. And the worst case scenario is because we had fans and things circulating, you could probably check a day later and find stuff, by the fan because the air is sucking in. And I had lost a ring, and I looked at the fan and I was like, oh, I can't find it. And a day or two later, what happened is I was actually getting ready, and I took my ring off to do something, and I put it up under those bags that you saw so it wouldn't float away, and forgot that I did it. And I didn't realize it till some day later, and I was like, worst case scenario, we get down to earth, it's gonna fall on the floor. But I was moving the bags and miraculously out floated my ring, so. How are we doing for time? Good.
One question. When you came back to Earth, how was that physically for you? What was the biggest change or adjustment you had to do?
Yeah, so gravity is really heavy, and you don't know that until you leave it and come back in. And so as we were coming back in, I was actually sitting on the flight deck up top, and I was on this side. So the commander went out, the pilot went out, and the guy sitting next to me went out. So I was the last one. And I stood up, and I just fell right back down in my seat. And I still had my parachute on. So the folks that come in to greet us are called the astronaut support personnel, ASP. So the ASP told me, he says, take off your parachute. I said, I took off my parachute. I stood up, and I just fell back down. He said, just, kind of get your land legs about you. I was like, okay, so I'm ready to get up. I used the seat in front of me to kind of pull myself up, and I kind of shuffled over. Now, we're upstairs, so you have to get downstairs, and there's a ladder. And the only way you can do that, you have to turn around and climb down the ladder. So I'm in the big orange suit that's about 40 pounds. So I turned around, I gently climbed down the ladder, And then I turn around because the hatch is here, but the hatch is actually lower. So you have to get on your knees and crawl out the hatch. So I get on my knees and I crawl out the hatch, and I'm kind of still in the hatch, and I have my hands on either side of the hatch, and there are 4 doctors out there, and I look at them, I said, I've fallen and I can't get up. I was just so heavy, I couldn't get myself up. So one doctor positioned himself here, the other here, and they kind of grabbed me under my arms and lifted me up. And then I began to walk, and I began to walk like this. Because my feet were just, I could not adapt to gravity really quickly, so I was kind of slapping the floor with my feet. And then just getting the whole suit off was interesting. So I got it off. And there's one thing that we do. Once you get out of your orange suit, you put these suits on, and you go down, the movie is there and so forth, and you want to do the hero walk. So you want to walk around the shuttle, right? And I was like, I may not fly again. I'm going to do that hero's walk. So my goal was to do the hero's walk. So as we were getting checked out by the doctors before we went outside, I'm walking up and down the corridor of the van trying to get my gait proper. And so I got out, and we went out, and we're walking, and they said, whatever you do, don't look up at the shuttle, because the shuttle's like an aircraft, so it's high. Because somebody one day looked up at the shuttle, they just kept going back. So there are things as you're coming back down to earth you need to do. Again, you're trying to keep everything straight, your head straight with your body so you don't get sick. It takes about a day for every day you're in space to actually kind of reacclimate. They don't let you drive because your depth perception is off. I did walk into a corner of a wall. I was going around the corner, and somehow I just banged into the wall. And so there's those type of things that happen to you when you're coming back. The gravity is really heavy.
We're actually going to have one more question from the audience and one question from the students back here.
All right. So is there anyone that has a question that hasn't gotten a chance to ask a question?
I have 2 questions. I know your daughters were younger when you went. How did they feel about you going? And then are you able to like communicate with the command center and then keep your family informed with how things are?
So my husband and I have been married for 6.5 years, and they're my bonus children, his biological children, so I didn't have them at the time. But I'll tell you, my mom was uber proud, as my siblings and were when I went up. But it's really emotional. They said they saw, they're excited. My daughter's about to go in space, and it lifts off. And my cousin said tears just start streaming down his face out of nowhere. It is very emotional knowing that your loved one is on there, and it just brings a whole host of emotions. So. Yes, but he's so lucky now that he's my husband, and they're. And I'm sorry, what was your second question, ma'am?
Are you able to keep in touch with like your command center and them?
Yeah, and so we actually can make phone calls because we have voice over internet protocol. And so they bounce the call off a satellite. It goes through Alabama and so forth. So I was able to, there are some calls that are scheduled, like halfway through the mission. You could say, I want to talk to my mom or whatever. But at the time I was dating somebody. Don't listen to this, honey. And I told him, I said, I'm going to call you. I said, if I call you, it's going to be delayed because they're bouncing off of satellites. And so I called him. It was probably 1 o'clock in the morning. And the only thing he could say is, I can't believe you're calling me from space. I'm like, you're going to think in the morning, I wish I would have said something a little bit more intelligent than that. That's all he said, the whole conversation. I tried to call my brother. I was going to surprise my brother and call. So I called him, and then I get a message that says, I'm sorry, this phone does not accept phone calls from unknown numbers. Not much I can do about that, brother. So you missed your phone call from space.
How long did it take you to train, and did you shrink or came back to Earth?
Did I shrink? Yes, this is what happens. The training flow is about a year for people who have never flown in space, because there's some things that they have to take that people who've already flown don't have to repeat. If you've gone before, your training flow is about 9 months, so we're about a year into it. And I didn't shrink, I just went back to my normal height. So yeah, unfortunately you don't get to keep the height that you gain when you're in space, because once you come back down here to an environment that has gravity, it weighs back on you. So yeah, that's why I wear heels. Yeah, so.
Well, thank you, Ms. Joan.
Thank you very much. Great audience. Oh Lord, baby. So, yes.
So all of us here, we hear about UFOs. Any sightings, any strange things? while you was up there?
I would tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. So, now we didn't see anything strange. The only thing that I saw, which is really gorgeous, were the northern lights. And so for 2 consecutive night passes, we saw that. But no, I didn't see any alien life. Thank you, honey. Thank you all for being a great audience.
So before we let you go, we wanted to present you with a small token of appreciation for taking the time to come all the way here and meet with us and tell us some amazing stories. And we thought what better way to do it than to have the very children that you're helping to inspire to do the honors. So the team captains of the Alpha team, you can come.
Thank you, Mrs. Higginbotham, for giving us your time today. Vision Builder Adventures would like to present you this award.
This award is the I Envision Award and presented to Joan Higginbotham.
This award is awarded to exceptional people who believe in dedicating time to inspire others.
So we present you with this award along with the card. Ms. Joan Higginbotham, you are a vision.
The late Steve Jobs would say, we have one more thing for you before you leave. As you probably figured out, this auditorium is actually just a small part of a larger museum. It has lots of different things that you can do, and in order to tell you a little bit more about that, we're going to have Councilman Jim Gallagher tell you more.
Thanks, man, appreciate it. Museum's really, really nice. So when you get a chance, you go out here. They have, back here they have dinosaurs that you go back and see. And back here they have animals that are stuffed and also live ones. So you can visit that. They also have the planetarium. And there's something to take place, what, noon? 12 o'clock, yeah. So, you know, on behalf of the Shield and the City of Gastonia, since I'm a city councilman, as Councilman James Mitchell said from Charlotte, and Joan Higginbotham, I want to thank you both for coming. I want to thank everyone for coming on out to Gastonia, to the Shield Museum. I really want you to stay, enjoy yourselves, because it's a really nice museum, and you're really going to find a lot of nice things. And for someone who's gone into space, 3 Gs going up into the shuttle and going all out there for 13 days, you are a true hero for the United States. Thank you very much.
Well, that is all that we had for you guys today. Thanks for coming, and thank you again, Mrs. Higginbotham, for presenting such an amazing presentation. Now, she has agreed to stick around and take some pictures. So if you guys would like to get a picture with Ms. Joan Higginbotham, you can start a line here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a picture first with the Vision Builder Adventure Kids, kind of like a group picture and individuals, and then we'll open the line for everybody else. So with that being said, thank you and have a fantastic Saturday.